And so,
yeah, I mean, he's actually comparing gay with killer.
right.
And saying that they're the same.
Because having sex with somebody is exactly the same as murdering them. You know?
If I can just interject something, that it's kind of funny to me because, you know, I've got like an Italian heritage, and there was a series of commercials that came on, I guess it was probably a couple of years ago, from a contact lens manufacturer that was selling colored contacts.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I remember about this particular, I don't remember the brand, thankfully, because I don't want to name any brand names, but what they were, the commercials were talking, they would show a really beautiful woman, they'd be talking about her beauty, and then they would say, you know, like your lips were as red as a rose, and then they would say, like, your eyes as brown as mud. And so it was like in trying to sell these colored contacts, they wanted to insult people with brown eyes and say your eyes are like mud, because what you really want is beautiful blue eyes, beautiful green eyes. And the reason you would market these contacts to people with brown eyes is why? Because most people on this planet have brown eyes. Right. So you've got all of Asia, all of India, all of the Mediterranean, all of South America, all of every native tribe anywhere. It's there's just a lot of people on the planet with brown eyes. It is definitely the predominant trait. It's a predominant genetic eye color. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that having blue eyes is like being Ted Bundy. You know, I mean, it's just because it's not the common trait doesn't mean it's a non-natural trait, or that it's a trait that doesn't, or that is somehow better or worse. It's just simply more rare. We talked about, I think, on the phone, that there's people who are born hermaphrodites. You cannot dispute this person has, like, very, compared to the rest of the population, they have very confused sex organs when they're born. It's not the norm in as far as numbers. But this is not, there was nothing unnatural about the person's birth, about their production, about, I mean, they were born and genetically put together just like anybody else, and something was different about them that made them unique in regard to the percentages of human population. But that doesn't make them wrong or mean that there's something bad about it, or that it's just simply, it was still absolutely natural. It's an absolutely natural human being with a natural birth. And people, I think, just have this idea that if it deviates from the standard, that somehow there's something really wrong with that, or it's suspect. But it's weird because you have these other traits like eye color that nobody blinks twice. Nobody says blue eyes are evil, or having two different colored eyes is evil, or it's like, no, it's simply what you would expect.
Well, and it's interesting that you brought up intersex conditions, because a lot of those are found predominantly in cultures that practice consanguineous marriages, where you've got very closely related people. So you've got lots of first cousins marrying each other, and so a gene for a rare condition suddenly is much more prevalent in this small population of people. And the interesting thing about this is that these small populations are typically held together by some very strict traditional culture or religious belief or something like that, and they want their sons and daughters to marry only within this small group so that they stay pure.
Yeah.
And so, so basically what you're doing is guaranteeing that there's going to be a generation of people that will exhibit some rare...
Yeah, you could break down your genes like that. I mean, really cause some problems.
Yeah.
I've heard, and I haven't done any independent research on it or read about it, but I remember seeing a program where they talked about incidence of birth defects in Amish societies is increasing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true or not. The show seemed pretty reasonable, and it makes sense to me if you're interbreeding on that level. It's almost like when people breed dogs. Mm-hmm. And whenever you have like a specific dog breed, there's always like the known physical problems with the dog. And I mean diversity is a good thing.
Yeah, and they even have a name for it. It's called the founder effect, where you have one individual that carries some mutation who, for whatever reason, has a disproportionate effect on the genetic profile of subsequent generations, either because he's got 25 wives and he's 150 kids or something like that, or You know,
Sure.
in the case of dog breeding, you know, you're breeding dogs for a specific set of traits, and you don't realize until generations later that those traits carry some baggage.
Sure.
So it's, you know, it's all good until it's not.
Until somebody breeds something bad.
Yeah. But the interesting thing, because getting to genetic baggage here, some of these quotes about homosexuality were pretty interesting because it's clear that neither of these individuals that wrote to us knew very much about what they were talking about at all. Because one of those, and there was this assertion that homosexuality implies some kind of reduced fitness, both for the individual and for the population that has a large number of homosexuals in it. And that's not actually true. In fact, it appears that the opposite may be true. There was a recent study that was done in the Public Library of Science 1, and it was about genetic factors influencing male homosexuality. There's actually multiple factors that are associated with male homosexuality, and it turns out that there's this constellation of factors that they also increase a woman's or the man's female relatives' fertility. So what happens is that women who have male homosexuals in their bloodline tend to have more children. And the increase in children from these women more than offsets the loss of children that those males would produce. And they went on to further test this, and they found out that male homosexuals in a family, it not only increases the reproductive rate over time, but in cases where fertility is declining because of other factors, the presence of that sequence of genes actually acts as a buffer for the decline in fertility. So it's one of those things that it might have actually an evolutionary purpose. It could be that homosexuality is a genetic marker for something else that's actually being selected for. So that was one of the items there. The other thing is that these assumptions in these quotes ignore the benefits of kin selection. So non-reproducing individuals are a benefit to social species.
Right, and I think that's an important thing, too, is that a lot of these people are confusing the idea of success, like genetic success and reproductive success,
right,
with individuals. And when you have a social species, the individual genetic reproduction is not necessarily as important. And it's, for example, you'll have something like wolves or dogs where you've got breeding pairs. Mm-hmm. And then you've got like an entire society that's set up just to protect the children of this breeding pair.
Right.
So here you have a lot of individuals that are reproductively accessible, but they're not breeding. And in fact, most of them aren't breeding.
Right.
And just a few are breeding, and yet that's a successful model for, canines. So it's when people start to talk about, like, this individual, I could easily look at that model and say, well, all those individuals are not fit. Mm-hmm. None of them are breeding.
Right.
But they have a close kinship with the breeding pair, and their society is built around the cohesion and the support that they offer to one another, and so their influence in protecting the breeding pair's offspring is beneficial to them, and it does ensure the fitness of that particular pack to go forward, as long as the pack survives and the pair continues to breed. And you can interchange that breeding pair. You can get a new alpha female, a new alpha male. That can change in and out, but usually it's just all within the family, I guess.
Yeah.
The society.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we already commented on that thing about isolating homosexuals would be absurd because you can't catch the gay.
Oh, that's.
I mean, that's just.
Homosexuals should be isolated. That was very weird to me.
Where do you think homosexuals come from? They come from straight people.
Yeah, I thought that was extremely bizarre. The phrasing is always, I think, very weird to me. And the word natural, I think, is tossed around way too loosely and without real forethought or without any real consideration to what's being actually said.